Hello, and welcome to the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson. We're on episode 18 already. I'm going to be going to episode 20 for this season and then wrapping it up. I've been going through all of these topics that I would have otherwise probably written articles or maybe done it on Substack. But instead I decided to just speak because I really do just use speech instead of typing anyway. So I'm kind of transitioning into working more with video and working more with speaking. And today I want to talk about art because that's what I was completely focused on for a good part of my career. And I went over this in my very first episode that I did for the podcast, which was about following your dream and questioning if you really have a dream. We have this idea that following art is this calling, and it's romanticized in the extreme by a lot of people to be an artist, to live the artist lifestyle. And I was enticed by that. I think I was, quite young when I started to learn about artists and hear about the bohemian lifestyle and living differently and living alternatively. And I just found that very appealing. And that was part of the reason I went into art. And I sure had a lot of surprises and shocks when I did get into fine arts. Now, I grew up with music, so I learned music very young, but I didn't really know much about the art community beyond that. And especially the intellectual side of things, I wanted to know more about the lifestyle. And when I got into art, I realized that the lifestyle thing is irrelevant. And a lot of people who live alternative lifestyles are not necessarily artists. For me, art was drawing. I was a drawer. I doodled constantly. I got in trouble at school for doodling. I was just drawing on everything all the time. Part of the way that I was able to pay attention in class was when I was doing something with my hands, and drawing helped kind of anchor me. Even as an adult, drawing was just constant. I loved the aspect of art school when we would go out with other students and just draw in our sketchbooks and do drawings together. That constant sketching is something I really, really miss. I'm no longer able to do that because of the disability that I have. And the truth is, I've been pretty unanchored since I've lost that. Now, through the process of making this podcast over the last almost 2 years, a year and a half, it has changed my perspective a lot. And over the last few months, especially, I've come to understand I've been going through a similar transition to what I had gone through before in my late 20s that led me to write my book, Dreaming Life's Language, which was that I couldn't continue with animation or with fine arts anymore. I realized then that I was not going to be able to keep drawing because I realized what effect the disability was having on me. And now I've come to a very similar conclusion about writing, even though that was the direction I went in after that. The fact is, I still need to put my health first, and right now I need to look at other possibilities. I've been wanting to do more speaking, but I think even the idea that I can focus on my career is pretty challenging. I have right in front of me a letter from the government of Alberta telling me I'm being transitioned onto a new disability assistance program that is meant to be for people with disabilities who can work. Well, I know that I can work, and I have been working a lot. However, getting paid, on the other hand, is a different matter. And it really isn't my fault, and it's not the fault of disabled people if other people aren't willing to pay them for their work. The fact is, we live in a world where a lot of people are unemployed, and a lot of labor is being replaced by robots. And so for human beings to work right now is a really big challenge. Now, on the positive side, this program is a little better once I do make money. However, the fact is, right now, being online, trying to gain an audience, I need to have thousands of followers before I can make any money online. And now, if I'm looking around me and I see very few artists who are able to make a living, the small number of artists that I know that are living off of their art do a lot of commissions. So they're very open to people who want something very specific, whether it's a portrait or abstract work for their homes, and they're willing to pay money to get someone to make the kind of work that they want. Now, I did not go into art to do that kind of thing. I went into art in order to express my own self, in order to understand myself, in order to deal with the traumas that I've been through, and for just that soothing aspect of drawing and painting that has brought me back to that I find so enjoyable. But I'm not able to enjoy that anymore. So, what comes next for me after this podcast, now that I've gone through all of this writing and speaking, and still looking for that creative spark that I found from drawing that I haven't found again, and I'm still looking for that. Of course, the plant world, as I've spoken about before, is extremely enticing, and it gives me some of that visual aesthetic, that feedback of beauty that I love so much and that I loved about art, and bright colors and that kind of thing. So the impact of art is overwhelming, and I think the reason why art is so undervalued today is for the simple reason that we have mass produced so much of it that a lot of people don't even see it. You know, Probably in our ancient past, there wasn't, there may have been artists who were focused on art, but a lot of people kind of did crafting all the time. A lot of people were trained from when they were very young to make pottery or weaving or what have you. I can only imagine some of them might have been noted to be a lot better than others, and perhaps they specialized a little bit more. But because we live in this extremely complex economic system where we are expected to specialize, you get into that pool of artists who have talent. I mean, it's recognizable, it's obvious. Some people are very, very talented at different things. For me, I was talented at drawing specifically. I mean, I don't even remember my earliest days of drawing, but I do remember seeing other kids drawing and realizing I was a lot better than them. And so that gave me that confidence boost. It gave me that feeling of satisfaction. And I think that's why, even though I entertained other ideas about what I wanted to do in biology, veterinary, whatever it was, I always came back to art because of how much I loved picking up that pen or pencil and just making images. And most of the time that I started drawing, I didn't know what I was going to draw. Of course, a lot of people today don't really understand what it's like to be an artist and to spend so much time making art, because I did get very good at representational art. I mean, I was very young when I realized like what a feat that was to be able to create something in an image that other people recognized. To draw a cat and people knew that that was a cat, like that was phenomenal to me. And I think that's what gave me so much positive feedback from others, because they were also impressed with that ability. I learned that very young, representational art tended to impress people. The better you were at it, the more they would be impressed. And that's really what led me to art school. That plus that love that I had of doing it. And if you listen to that first episode that I did on the first season of this podcast, I went through what I realized were the three main things that you need in life in order to have your career, which is not just loving it, not just getting that positive feedback, but of course having the opportunities. And sadly today, there are really not that many opportunities for artists. Most of the opportunities are very competitive. Right now I'm working on another grant. We'll see if I get it. I hope I do, because I'm ready to move on back into the film world, not into animation, however. When it comes to value, I mean, value is everything in art, and that's what makes it so complicated because we do live in this capitalist economic system where things are valued psychologically. And if the majority of the people don't value art, they don't value what artists do, they don't value the vision of the artist, then how can you expect artists to get paid anything? If people can buy a cheap print at a home decor store for 20% of the price of what a local artist is charging, they're going to go for that. You know, it is very much a rich people's game to get into art collection, unless they are artists. And there is a very huge gap in income between artists of different popularity levels. A lot of artists are scraping by on nothing. I think the starving artist stereotype is really damaging because, you know, it's not true. I don't know any artist that would put up with starving, honestly. Like, I don't know any artist that is that in love with art that they would give up on food. In fact, I think a lot of artists end up kind of food obsessed and maybe even going into cooking and cuisine because that also is an art form. So it's wrong thinking based on the biographies of a few particular artists that give that stereotype that I think is really wrong. And the other stereotype that I think is really wrong is the same stereotype that I had about alternative lifestyles and people living really differently and outside of the box just because they're an artist. What I found in the art community is not that at all. In fact, a lot of artists are extremely conventional in their actual lifestyle. It's all really just perspective on that kind of thing, of what you think is normal or not normal. And a lot of artists are not really trying to be not normal. They're just trying to do their own thing. And a lot of them are just trying to make a living. A lot of it comes down to really, really practical, very normal ways of living their life in order to have a career that pays the bills. It really is that simple. And that's why I think romanticizing art can be a bad idea, because it will give you these false notions of what artists are, of what artists do. It can make you assume even that you know the politics of artists. And it's not that the stereotype is totally wrong. You know, a lot of people were very unusual, but a lot of times it wasn't really intentional. And I think the reason for that is that a lot of people get a lot of healing out of art, and the psychological impact of art is really big. And that's something also that I wrote a bit about in my book, and that I started to realize, and why I came to this theory about genetics and consciousness is that art is really an interface between the body and the mind. There's all kinds of weird ideas that you're going to get into art as well about what it means. A lot of artists have pretty narrow views on what art history means, but the thing is you can always come back to it over and over and over again with different perspectives. You know, you can choose just about any aspect of art history to analyze it, whether it's economics or religious or social. Like, there's just so many ways to look at art, and it really is subjective. I get caught up in some of these artistic reality shows, you know, where they do competitions on glass blowing or pottery or whatever. And it really is subjective. You start to see that after a while when you don't agree with the judge's decisions. It is subjective, and I've been through that too. The fact is that it's not clear to me why some art is more popular than others. It's not always clear why some specific works of art take off. I do think a lot of it is herd mentality, and that comes back to that value system that we have in the economics, where as things become more popular, they spiral upwards in popularity, and that's from the herd mentality. those people that are kind of neutral and don't have strong opinions, and someone else with a strong opinion says, this is a really important artist, this is really important artwork, and then they'll hop on board even if they don't really care about it because it's perceived to be of value. And it does make me sad that we have that hierarchy in art, and it is a pretty extreme hierarchy, but fundamentally it's still the expression of a human body and the human mind, that we were just perceiving that value. So art has never really fundamentally meshed with the capitalist economic system, and it's still not. The fact that there are grants just shows you the efforts that people have had to make in order to get art to fit in to this money system that doesn't give people what they need. And as much as I liked the idea of that bohemian lifestyle, the fact is that it has put some people off artists and stereotype artists, and even avoid that because of perceiving artists as all being kind of alternative and all being really left wing, when the reality of it is that artists are really a very diverse group of people. You'd still find it hard, though, to find an artist that would argue with the fact that artists need more money, though, because it's true. I mean, some countries have already started basic income. I think basic income for artists and agriculturalists especially are just the most important, I think, fundamentally, because of how unpredictable it is. The amount of effort that I've put into art, the amount of work and hours that I've put into art and writing and these creative projects that I've done is hard to calculate. It's hard to understand. And the fact is, it hasn't given me a living. It hasn't brought back the money for me. And it's hard for me to understand what it is people want and what it is people like. I think what I've come out with it, sadly, is that actually a lot of people seem to be attracted to the art that takes the least effort but has the most joy in it. This sort of joie de vivre that you might find in certain works that are lighthearted, that often gets people going the most. And I have had the most positive feedback of those artworks where I was sort of putting joy into it. But when it comes to psychology and spirituality, I've also felt compelled, very strongly compelled, to investigate other ideas, to go through very difficult, very dark emotions and images. And that's really, really scared people. I never intended to scare people with it. But the fact is, something's messed up in my genetics. And I believe those images come out that are from our collective past as human beings. And if you look into history, you'll find a lot of darkness, and a lot of terrible things that have happened that have been brought about by human beings, mostly towards other human beings. And we can't just pretend that didn't happen. So I've done that work, and I've followed those other issues that I felt that I needed to deal with and that I needed to understand. And it's been of benefit to me psychologically, spiritually, but it's been a hindrance socially, economically, because a lot of people find it a lot harder to deal with the dark arts. And yet some of the dark artists are really, really popular now too. But even they have had to often, pick and choose and often do a lot more lighthearted work as well. Hence something like dark comedy, where you're mixing the dark side and the light side together. And I find that really appealing too. And the fact is, the more that I painted, the more that I did art, I was getting really funny. It shocked me at first when I showed people some of my work and they laughed, because there's this feeling of like, this is art and this is serious, but it's really not. Comedy plays a huge role in art. and it's from absurdity. And absurdity was one of the things that I absolutely loved about going to art school. The unexpected, the surprises, seeing new art on the walls every time I went there, coming around the corner and there would be some dramatic installation. Other places you just show up and there would be a performance going on in the middle of the hallway. That kind of thing is so exciting and interesting. And a lot of it is really funny. Comedy and art, like comedy is an art form, it's an important art form. And I never expected to get that into it. I almost never saw it as a possibility because it's so pervasive and it's almost to the point where it's also competitive because it's so pervasive. So you feel like, well, how could I ever make it in comedy if there's so many comedians and they're all really, really funny? That's part of art, and that's a great part of art. And that helps balance out those difficult subjects that are still worth going through. For me, the representational art was a joy to do in the moment, but once I was done and I'd done a drawing of an existing photograph or a person, I wasn't interested in it anymore. I was more interested in the art that I was doing that was coming out of my own subconscious, that kind of stuff that was unexpected and unusual and surreal. And language is sort of an interesting thing, but the fact is, what I've learned from doing this podcast, from writing this book, is like language isn't my thing the way that drawing was my thing. And I think I don't have any choice but to explore as many different possibilities of how to combine those things, how to combine storytelling and image making together until I'm at the point where I'm actually making a living. So in some ways it's hard because you set your mind to do something and it doesn't work out. On the other hand, when it doesn't work out, you just have to look outward and see what's out there, and that spurs that creative vision and that imagination for what else you could do. And I think right now, economically, socially, we're in a place where there's a lot of people searching. I really know that I'm not the only one trying new projects, throwing them out there, seeing if people are biting. But in a world where people have less money, you're going to get less people biting. So you got to keep looking for where is the money? How are we going to get the money distributed to everyone? I really want to hope that the government is moving towards basic income. I think that's the case. It hasn't been stated explicitly, but I know that would change a lot of artists' lives who would honestly be making better work. And I think if I look at the problems with a lot of the work I've done, it's been a lack of funding why it wasn't better in the first place and why I wasn't able to get it to the quality that I really wanted to. And, fundamentally, the inequalities in our economic system are always going to be a hindrance to artistic expression. And I genuinely hope that changes. So, I felt like I needed to talk about art a little bit again as I'm getting to wrapping up this podcast because art is just so important. I love looking at art. I love having it around me. It's just a part of who we are as human beings. I can't imagine being a human being and not appreciating art. It's been asked, like, why make art? Like, why breathe? Like, why be alive? I mean, that's just what we are. We are artists. And a lot of people that don't think they appreciate or understand art and don't think that they're creative are just not really looking at it right because it is there. It's within you. Even if you fix a small object, that's still creative. It's still kind of an art making project. Even if you're just drawing a simple diagram, you're still engaging in that artistic side of yourself. But I think we've just become so specialized that people will compare themselves and think they have to be super talented in order to be considered creative. But if I learned anything from going to art school, it's that I was actually a really good drawer, but I wasn't necessarily a general artist. I'm not a generalist in art at all. And there were certain subjects where I pretty much just failed. I mean, I outright failed. So I'm not good at every kind of art, but it's an appreciation. It's something so deep and it's like it's in your bones, it's in your DNA to have that art. We are art in a way. I think life is art. We are, in a way, life's art forms that have been created in all of these different forms, and that's just what we are. So I think if you're someone who kind of looks away from art or doesn't appreciate it, like, it's a part of you. If you look within yourself, you will find in some way in your life, you're probably being creative. You're just not associating that with art, but it's still there. Thanks for joining me. This is Kim Anderson on the Never Ending Experiment.